Good evening. The subject that we're going to discuss tonight is the beginning of Tantric yanas, vehicles. But before we get into the details of a particular Tantra that we're going to discuss, I would like to present certain facts, maybe regarded as certain attitudes, which are connected with the notion of continuity thread that we discussed in the early part of our course. It is necessary to understand that thread of continuity is a very special approach in Tantric tradition, and it is known as Gyu Tantra, which means continuity. The continuity cannot take place unless that there is some basis that we can continue ourselves. And now the question is, who is continuing, what is continuing? Since we have already discussed and studied the Hinayana level and the Mahayana level of Buddhism already, that who is making the journey of the trip. As far as this point is concerned, nobody is making this journey. But then you could again say, then how is it possible that there is a path, there is a yana at all? Well, possibilities also again at the same time, there is no path, there is no yana. That's a possibility. But we can't say there is not, because everything is a phenomenological, experiential level, that we have to experience ourselves rather than making metaphysical assumption of some kind, particularly. So we have to come back to square one. What is this? Who am I? Well, the simplest way to look at that point of view doesn't really matter who asked the question, but does the question exist at all or not? Where is the question come from? Intriguedness. I wanted to find out the origin of the truth, where that came from, how it is possible there is question at all. So from that point of view, we are talking in terms of that, the questionlessness state of being, that the questioners are purely fabrications. And since the question doesn't exist, and therefore the questionnaire doesn't exist either. And we have to work backward, the opposite logic. Since that there is no sun, therefore it must be nighttime. Rather than view the whole thing, this must be nighttime, I see the darkness, therefore there's no sun, which is a weak logic. So the question begins, since there's no sun shining, it must be nighttime. So question discussion process comes backward from that point of view, coming back, that first the flash of reality is experienced. Then one asks the question of reality, whether reality does exist or not in its own right. It doesn't. reality depends on the perceiver of reality. Since such perception doesn't exist, therefore reality doesn't exist either. So we have to work from that kind of process. Otherwise things become too linear, too theistic, too linear. And our train of thinking had to change from different angle altogether from that point of view. So the question of a perceiver, question of a being, is purely a phantom of our experience, purely phantom. This phantom is questionable whether phantom exists or not. Phantom exists because of its phantom quality, but at the same time, phantom doesn't exist because of its phantom quality. At the same time, that you are cutting your own throat if you discuss about that. It's a double binding factor, so you're swallowing a razor blade, naked razor blade, through your throat. Within understanding of egolessness, non-existence, that one had to begin to develop what's known as the egoless insight. The knowledge of egoless insight. And traditionally it is known as Laktong Dagme Tokwe Shirap, which literally means Laktong is insight, Dagme is egoless, Tokpa is realization, Shirap is knowledge. It's knowledge that brings egolessness. Without that, there's no way of understanding Vajrayana or Tantric experience. Understanding Tantric experience at all. So let us flash back on that particular notion, if you like to call it a concept, go ahead. But we need something to work on. It is absolutely necessary. The sense of non-existence, egolessness is absolutely important background to realize, to understand the differences between non-theistic and theistic traditions. We are not particularly arguing at this point the existence of God as such particularly, but we are talking about whether the perceiver of a God exists or not. But having understood very clearly and precisely that we know that the perceiver doesn't exist, so therefore God doesn't exist either. And from that point of view, there is a continuity, again, which has nothing to do with divine providence of anything at all, since the divinity is already disregarded. That continuity we are talking about, a tantric tradition of tantra, gyut, that we are talking about is the sense of path, sense of journey that takes place constantly. This journey is by no means illusion. It's a real journey, a journey that takes place on Earth, planet Earth, in this particular solar system, in this particular country for that matter. It's a real journey that takes place. When we talk about this journey, you might ask a question saying, are you talking in terms of a struggle or ambition or something like that? We are not talking in terms of a struggle or ambition. We are not talking in terms of ambition. That's quite clear. We are not talking about in terms of ambition. But maybe we are talking in terms of ambition. On the other hand, that ambition from this point of view is that you're inspired to the nowness, this very moment. We are talking in terms of struggle because there's need for a lot of exertion. Sense of exertion to the practice of the discipline is very much necessary and needed. So we find ourselves in a completely dichotomic level. You could say that on the other hand, that we are talking about non-being, no world, everything's non-existence. But on the other hand, that we are discussing process of a path, pattern of a path, that we could proceed, we could exert ourselves. You might even so far as to go and saying that, isn't this somewhat contradictory? Isn't there a hole somewhere? Isn't there a problem somewhere? Well, if you look at that way, split your hair, there's no truth anywhere, none whatsoever. Let it be that way. Let us have a dichotomy. Let us be suspicious of the nature of the path. That's great. That's precisely what's needed, so that you don't become so gullible as to, you've been asked to lick your teacher's bottom, and you're willing to do so. And that is somewhat ugly and too gullible. And we are not asking for that. And it is good that you have such questioning mind, such suspicion, and such unyielding pride, so to speak. That's necessary, that's good. That is what's required in the studying of Tantra particularly, as well as the rest of the Buddhist teachings in any case. That you are not asked to be just one of those who would just take anything for its word. It seems the caution is that there is a sense of journey takes place, whether journey is regarded as hypothetical journey, cynical journey, or actual spiritual journey, there is a journey is taking place. Continual journey is taking place, which becomes part of an important point here, that we have to acknowledge some kind of journey is taking place. Sometimes you might experience your particular journey is a backward journey, that you have started on some point of reference in which you have a confidence. Once upon a time you had a confidence, but now you find yourself quite uncertain. And you still think you are doing something or other. You are uncertain as though you are going forward or backward is uncertain. And still, it's necessary to keep some kind of pride that you are taking some kind of journey. It doesn't really matter whether it is a forward journey or backward journey. The journey is actually taking place. That is what is the count. That is, we know that we're getting older each time. Physically, we might find ourselves becoming infantile, psychologically or whatever, but still older version of infantile, rather than becoming a baby physically. So we know that we're getting older physically, psychologically, whatever, it really doesn't matter as long as we have a body. We're going on and on and on. We're developing gray hair, we're becoming somewhat inaccurate in our physical behavior, our sight becomes blurry, our speech becomes slightly old-fashioned, and our hearing system is slightly degenerated, and our taste in the food and taste in excitement or entertainment becomes somewhat dumb or dull. That we are getting old. Whether you regard it as going backward to infantile level, or whether we're going forward, approaching our death, whatever, that something is happening to us. That is kind of the metaphor that is journeys actually taking place. Whether you like it or not, you are moving forward. Once a person is committed, himself or herself, to become a refugee onto the Buddhist path, taking refuge, a vow, and committed himself or herself into the path, that's a preliminary decision. Decide to call himself a Buddhist. And after that, then slowly a person begins to develop further confidence that not only working on himself, but you can also work with others. Then you take another vow, what's called a bodhisattva vow, you begin to take that. And then the further proceeding process is to take tantric initiation, abhisheka, the transformation experience we discussed the other day. You are ready for that. And you are still making a journey. On those between procedures, you might feel that you are going backward or forward, whatever. That's the play of emotions takes place. Rather than actuality is happening, that constantly, if you feel you're becoming infantile baby, you're learning, or if you think you are insignificant old man, you're still learning. So learning process takes place constantly throughout the whole thing. Next headline. The first yanas of Tantra is what's known as the Kriyayoga. Kriya, yoga, Kriya. It is very difficult to go through the complete details since our class, so-called class here, is enormous, and individual experience understanding is uncertain. Some are highly well developed and some are just beginners, and we have a lot of mixtures of audience here. And I would like to make general approach to understand these different yanas that we're going to discuss next further coming weeks that we have in our class. That in terms of Kriyayoga is concerned, Kriya literally means action. The yoga of action. Which has something to do with the psychological attitude of the same continuity we've been discussing about non-existence of ego. That the same kind of continuity we've been talking about that a continual experience that you have developed the egolessness and the Hinayana level, and you have understood the compassionate activities that might take place in Mahayana level. And now we are in the Vajrayana level, so there's continuity of inspired person or student who are well disciplined in the Hinayana level, highly inspired and working with others in the Mahayana level. Then finally a person is coming to grips with the reality properly, thoroughly, in the Tantric level. Kriyayoga from this point of view of action, the yana of action, the vehicle of action, the whole basic approach is based on that of purity, cleansing, cleanliness. The basic notion of cleanliness from Kriyayoga's point of view of Tantra is concerned, it's understanding reality in the sharpest point of view, the clearest point of view. In order to see what's known as the Vajra world or Tantric world properly, thoroughly, and clearly, that you have to see it from a highly purified version. Otherwise, you begin to see a spot of dirt all over the place. And that does not create the clear vision of Kriyayoga as such. Actions such like vegetarianism and taking bath constantly and keeping a very pure life is recommended. But in this case, by no means it is a trip, because you have been already trained, experienced, educated through the Hinayana and the Mahayana level already. So therefore you are up to that particular thing, rather than suddenly Kriyayoga is presented to you, that you have to give up your nipples. One of the basic notions of Kriyayoga is concerned, it's there's the purity in emotions. There's a dirt in emotions. I think that's one of the basic points that we should understand in terms of Kriyayoga is concerned. Particularly the Vajramana, Doji Tingwa Tantra is concerned, it talks about that great deal, is that there is emotions occurred in a spontaneous way, then that spontaneity of emotions be interpreted, translated into terms of your advantage. Having done so, you begin to possess your emotion as your territory, that you have a logic, that you have an argument which is for you. The rest of the other person is illogical, unreasonable, that your type of emotional approach is the accurate because you feel it, you have experienced it properly, thoroughly. So you begin to take pride in that emotion, fundamentally. Finally, you begin to find yourself being so righteous that you're upsetting, you're being extraordinarily passionate, proud, jealous, are justified because you have your logic is worked out completely properly. So that has become a problematic process at this point. And in other words, that you have pure emotion happening at the beginner level, and you have a diluted, that you have put stop to it, that you contaminated. And finally, at the end, you find yourself swimming in a pile of dirt, sewage pool, which is extraordinarily irritating, to say the least, and somewhat hellish, in fact. So, according to the Kriyayoga's concept of emotions concerned, according to Vajrayana Tantra, and also a lot of commentaries that we have studied, it talks about the working with the emotions from Kriyayoga's point of view, that separate two types of emotions. One type of emotion which might be called wisdom, which is the flashes of instantaneous experience that you have experienced, what's called yeshe, or yana, whatever you experience. You experience them in the beginner's level. First flash, you experience them properly, thoroughly, without preconceptions. They become insight. And then, at the level when your emotions becomes, your wisdoms begin to deteriorate its particular aspect, and it began to become the ordinary passion, ordinary aggression, ordinary ignorance. And then that is regarded as dirt, impurity. So there is a definite black and white experience there. That first impulse, experience, is regarded as purity, true experience of reality in its fullest sense. And then we begin to water down that. We begin to put all kinds of other stuff in it and try to possess them, and then it becomes confused ones. So that seems to be one of the basic points of Kriyayoga's approach to experience of as a person on the path is concerned, that there is a sense of experience and that there's a sense of a neurosis happening at the same time. So from the Kriyayoga's point of view, the neurosis being cut out as undesirable part. See them clearly, look at them, and then finally, so-called, flash down to the toilet. And a way to do that is all constant purification ceremonies, and whereas the practices that involved all kinds of visualizations which are highly developed at this point. In terms of visualization is concerned, that it's very transparent visualization rather than just purely simply imagining that you are great guy, and think yourself as a good person. But in this case, visualization is identifying with your particular state of psychological being, that part which is associated with that purity, the inherent purity, inherent innocent quality that you have. That the deities are visualized in the name of your innocency, or with the experience of your innocency. So the innocent quality or pure aspect of you as being the part of the deities, part of realization, and the part of living enlightened entity, Herokas, or Tathagatas, whatever you have. So from that point of view, Kriyayoga's approach to life is have segregation. Have a segregated idea. Certain part of your life is good, pure, why not? And certain part of your life and your experience are impure. They're diluted and they're contaminated by egocentrism at the same time. So have that attitude very clearly experienced properly. And that seems to be the basic point. We are not purely talking in terms of how to relate with with divinities or deities or anything particularly, but we are purely talking in terms of the existence of real experience from that point of view. Maybe we should have a discussion period at this point. And I would like to remind you again and again, once more, that questions that you're going to ask, I hope that you're going to make it applicable to this particular talk, so that your fellow colleagues around you, students around you, could share, and the whole thing becomes an educational thing at the same time, that you have some understanding of the question about we're discussing tonight, rather than hypothetical aspect of whatever.
I wanted to understand better several things you said. When you're talking about Kriyayoga, you said first you feel you're in a state of purity, and then you recognize your neurosis, and then you cut through it. I didn't understand why the purity came first.
Well, that's the inspiration, according to Tantric point of view, that there is inherently Vajra nature, inherently pure, that it can't be contaminated and it can't be destroyed at all. There is fundamental toughness, that moon might be behind clouds, but still moon is in itself pure, because the cloud is the problem. So if you sweep away the clouds, moon is sure to be a good moon.
And then did you say, under visualization, that you dare to visualize your innocence?
Innocent. Yeah.
Innocence.
Innocent, yeah. That you are pure already, inherently you are pure automatically. So that the sense of innocentness, that you don't have to apologize to the world. You take what you deserve from that point of view. That purity is there already, and you are there already at the same time.
How do you visualize it?
Yeah. I think you have to go through trainings before you be told how to visualize that. You actually visualize directly, simply.
Rinpoche, you spoke of getting rid of, one way or another, egocentricity and neuroses. And I was wondering how, in this talk, that process differs from, for example, getting rid of egocentricity on a lower level, not a Tantra level, but the Mahayana level, where supposedly the person has come to that understanding about egocentricity and has been able to work without that or his neuroses coming into play. How does the Tantra yoga of action differ?
Well, the same as what's developed in the Mahayana level already, because we can't have a Tantra without a Mahayana or Hinayana to begin with. And does the same way in a more progressive way, which is that your emotions, egocentrism, are not regarded as part of the problem, or even part of the evangelical trip that Mahayana begin to develop a little bit. That you're going to save all sentient beings, you're going to be good girls and good boys, a good social worker. And that has become the problem with the Mahayana Buddhism from that point of view. But in the Tantric tradition, it seemed to be quite a different and more matter of fact that anything that involves your experience of your related with the world, that you are simply working with it rather than any conception of purity involved, none whatsoever.
I thought that there was a question of purity that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's the different kind of purity. Purity in pride in one's own existence, rather than moralistic purity.
Is this connected with the notion of Vajra?
Yeah. When we talk about a purity in Kriyayoga, we are not talking about a moralistic purity. We are talking about inherent purity, basic inherent purity.
So it'd be like a purity of a crucible to make...
Purity of what?
Of a crucible, where you make something, substances, pure.
Something like that.
Okay.
Topless gentleman.
Could you explain some more about the phantom?
Could I what?
The phantom?
Phantom?
Yes.
Does that interest you?
I don't understand what you. I don't understand what it is.
Phantom is phantom. It's a real experience. in a certain way, but at the same time it is unreal. That you look up in the sky, you thought you saw a flying saucer. In fact, it turned out to be a frisbee. You saw that because you got so bored. And the same as a mirage, that you are so thirsty in the desert that you thought you saw ocean, lake, because you're so thirsty. And you begin to see water shimmering with the waves and maybe sailboats on them, palm trees maybe. That's what's called a phantom. Anything else?
Thank you.
68.
I don't see the difference between the theistic and the non-theistic point of view.
Can you say that again?
I don't see the difference between the point you're trying to make about the difference between the theistic and non-theistic point of view. Like I've been reading Kukai, which is on the reading list for this course, and the way he talks about Mahavajrayana Buddha, it sounds like a Christian talking about God.
Well, that's maybe the problem. That's why we have such a course to begin with, is that from the point of view of Kukai, Kobodashi, and his relation with the Mahavajrayana Buddha was not a protector, not a deity even, not a patron saint, but it was a manifestation of himself. So therefore he could become one with Kukai, one with the Mahavajrayana, that he is Mahavajrayana himself, that in fact he demonstrated a miracle, that he became Mahavajrayana on some certain situation. When people begin to challenge him, he just became one. And they begin to see him as being Mahavajrayana. So I think that's the point, that one of the problems that if you are a theistic practitioner of religion, that if you want to become one with the God, that it is very difficult that you present yourself as a God while you're having afternoon tea. And you have to find out what God means by those people, what kind of God they have, the ideas about God. And the old guy with the white mustache, beard, and long white hair. And quite possible the person would find themselves puzzled, that as if this person sitting on your next chair has suddenly got old, and he's becoming an old man rather than being God particularly. And there's a lot of concept is involved there. That Kobodashi becoming a Mahavajrayana is very matter of fact and very simple. And there's no reference point being made on upstairs particularly, or for that matter, trying to secure with the downstairs as being the source of frankness. So there's no refuges taking place from that. Nobody's asked for testify Kukai, Kobodashi, but he just did it himself, very simply.
I still don't see the difference.
I beg your pardon?
I still don't see the difference, because it seems like somebody could have the same reaction to the concept of Mahavajrayana as the one you just described that they might have if they were sitting with someone who suddenly became God. like I understand that there's like maybe what you could call conventional Christian concept and a way of relating to God.
Yeah.
But there
Well,
are.
I think the difference is there is that simply it's simplistic or overly emotional. Buddhism is known to be its coldness, which is maybe quite rightly so. Its coldness, from Buddhist point of view, and miracles are regarded as just a simply matter of fact, rather than an idea for such stirred emotional level that because you're so emotional that you produced your manifestation of your emotion, which is a theistic thing in a lot of ways, that a devotion plays extremely important part. You have to believe. Absolutely, you have to believe. If you don't believe, that you can't see. I think the difference is a big deal. That into the experience of Kobodashi, that his experience is not a big deal. It's just a straightforward eye level magic. In the case of theistic traditions, maybe there's a problem with all kinds of non-eye level experience. That things have become extraordinary, that we should acknowledge the lofty ideas, or the loft.
Isn't the same thing possible though in Buddhism? Like that guy who thought he was Maitreya Buddha?
It shouldn't be, otherwise Buddhism is corrupted. We wouldn't regard it as a true Buddhism at all.
But I mean the same type of delusion is possible for...
It is possible that the human mentality is to be theistic. Because they have their father, because they have their mother, and because they have ancestors, and always been theistic, and that's why the primitive cults also have ancestor worships of all kinds. And that's the natural thing. Samsaric mind functions, but from the point of view of non-samsaric approaches concerned, that those approaches becomes unnecessary. It's heavy burden rather than reality. That's why the Buddhist approach is called wake, opposed to sleep. You could be in your world of your dream. You can dream all kinds of things, but at the same time becomes dubious.
Would you say that the Bodhisattva has a sane attitude to life, but is somewhat naive as to who they really are? The Bodhisattva who hasn't studied Tantra.
Who's saying that? Can you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Where
Oh, here.
You? Where are you? Are you there? I think we could say that. You got it. You got some ideas about the whole thing. There's a gentleman at the wall. Stained glass shirt.
Seems the other night you said that non-existence, the conviction of your non-existence was basis of being able to relate to these energies, emotions. And now tonight you said that pride in the purity of your existence is basic.
Last night?
No, the last lecture. Lecture before last.
Do you have any problems with that?
No.
Maybe you can say some of the problems for the benefit of the audience.
I think you're here for the benefit of the audience.
I beg your pardon?
It's my impression that you're here for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah.
Let's have some benefit.
Well,
Do we exist? Do we go about it that way? Or do we
do we
take...
exist?
I seem to, obviously.
We don't exist.
Is that it?
I think pretty much so.
That means I don't have to pay $3 to get in the door anymore, right?
I don't know what it means, but simply that's the fact. That's the truth of the matter. Good luck, sir.
Thank you, sir.
If the emotions start out as pure, inherently pure, how do they become impure?
That seems to be the source of your study in the Kriyayoga, to find out all about it. There's no particular answers given, but emotions are basically pure, and you've been contaminating them. That's what it says in the books. And it is up to you to practice and to find out. That seems to be as far as it goes. I mean, that's why the point of the path is concerned, that the path is not already programmed for you as if you have a worldwide tour ticket of flying around the world. That nobody's booked your ticket, but you've been shown, you've been told that you have a world around you. You can take a trip around, but at the same time you have to find out how to get the ticket, how to earn the money. So from that point of view, Tantra is not particularly regarded as travel agency place, which gives money freely, so that you have a good time. Good luck, sir.
This purity that you talk about on a tantric level, does it arise from a basic faith in one's own being?
I didn't hear what you said.
I say the purity that you speak of on a tantric level, does it arise from a sense of faith in one's own nature?
Sense of what?
Faith?
Faith? Well, it does, and it doesn't at the same time. Faith is a mutual thing, that you got to have faith on something to begin with. Otherwise, you can't have faith. So therefore, you feel that what you have faith in, that you have studied already, you have experienced some kind of reality with it already. So purity doesn't have anything to do with faith particularly, but experiencing one's reality. One's experience, one's reality. That things are inherently pure, and that's what it is. That there is pure Buddhas, Tathagatas, and Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma. Buddhas exist, Tathagatas exist. They're inherently pure. And you experience them personally at the same time. Well, it doesn't particularly depend on the faith. It's experience on the personal experience which might bring the faith. Rather than the faith comes first, the experience comes afterwards. Young lady in yellow.
Rinpoche, I believe you said that neurosis is to be cut out as the impure part. Can you describe for us the process of purification?
Most of us what?
Can you describe for us the process of purification? Just what does purification entail?
Well, that's a $65 question. How? It depends on who is doing it. I think it's a question of experience, personal experience, very personal experience, that how to solve my problem is not part of the process at all. But the question here is what to relate with the problem, how to relate with the problem, whether a problem does exist or not. Is the problem or whether problem promise? That's kind of question that we're involved here. We are not talking about how to get rid of that. Suddenly we find ourselves with all kinds of garbage pile that we want to get rid of. That isn't the problem, but the problem is to find out the ecology of garbageness of the whole thing. Before we dispose our garbage, we have to find out about our garbage at the beginning. So it's not a question of solving the problem or how we could get rid of this thing. If you begin to learn, or if you know how to do the whole thing, probably we do a great job in creating spiritual pollution in the atmosphere of all kinds. So that is not even possible. You can't create a spiritual pollution in the fullest sense. Of course you can, in the spiritual materialistic level, that's obvious. It's been done so already, and we are fascinated by that. But at the same time, the question of how we can purify ourselves is not a question of how we could do it, but it's a question of surrendering. That we could relate with our garbage, not because we want to get rid of it, therefore we could relate with it. There's all kinds of overlapping tricks that it goes on. If I accept the whole thing and regard it as there's no big deal, then would I be free by the whole thing? That's kind of little tricks, that overlapping tricks that goes on constantly. So the idea is being cut through the whole thing.
Do you mean by that to look at your neuroses in meditation and just let them go by?
Yeah, you got it.
I want to remind you, this Sunday is the first new tune for Naropa. If you want to say something.
Here.
Here? Yeah, here. In this hole.
Was letting go of his intelligence when he
Say that again?
Do you think that Naropa was letting go of his intelligence when he did all those things that Talopa told him to do, like jumping into a fire and all those things?
I think so, yeah. It's his experience of such frustration that he is suppressing, that finally somebody actually said something and began to click.
You mean he didn't necessarily have to go through that?
You saying what?
Have to go through that?
Absolutely necessary, particularly if you become professor. Young lady over there.
What's the difference between jumping into a fire and being gullible?
Can you say that again?
What is the difference between jumping into a fire and being gullible?
I didn't hear what you said.
Well, at the beginning of this talk, you started out about gullibility, and it's good to question, even in the Vajrayana style, to question the teacher. And the question that person asked just brought to my mind a question about a little confusion about what's the difference between being gullible and jumping into a fire. I mean, do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. I think the notion of gullibility is the notion of lack of precaution. That's the common sense dictionary language. That when somebody's called certain person is a gullible person, that automatically means that such person doesn't check out the logistics of safety, and the person will get into it automatically and suffers a great deal. It depends on who is inspired his gullibility. If the person who is inspired his gullibility may be a good one, and then everything's going to be okay, no trips involved, everything's smooth, fantastic trip. Then we decided to take a trip to Europe, Switzerland, and my gullible friend decided to join me because I did the research work for him, and everything's smooth and fantastic. We have no sharp edges, and everything's great. It was a great vacation, fantastic. But then there's another problem, is that personal experience, that a sense of gullibleness, in terms of originally expression of freedom at the beginning, but then hold back on himself or herself, and then begin to feel hesitant about that, but still would like to go along with it, and begin to panic a great deal, which is again a state of mind which is uncertain to person's experience as such, and the person haven't done the research work in the cosmos of the universe properly. I think that's the problem with the whole thing, that if a person has done enough research work, not as a technicians as such, but if a person has actually worked, experienced, looked into all the possibilities, logically, psychologically, experientially, domestically, physically, and everything, that everything's been looked and surveyed and experienced, researched properly. So there's no problem. But I think the problem is half-done things. That's what happens actually with the spiritual materialism actually is concerned, is people get turned on to spirituality suddenly, quickly. They didn't look into anything, but they just got turned on, so they just jump. It's the gullibility of the whole thing. And they don't take the attitude of looking into all possibilities, all situations properly. And that has become a problem in our society. In fact, we are suffering from that, actually.
Well, that seems to be a very Hinayana kind of approach. And I was wondering if in the Vajrayana level that's still, questioning is still a valid, I mean, was Naropa questioning when he jumped into the fire? Or is that something that is there something happening there that we don't know about yet?
Well, I think the Vajrayana's point of view of the whole thing is so powerful that we can't even talk about it at this point. The gullibility rate is much more powerful. Even you think you're a sensible Hinayanist scholar in Nalanda University who is a sensible person who has a perspective for the whole thing. You were trained in Harvard and Yale University, that you looked into everything, all the possibilities, but still, from the point of view of Vajrayana is concerned, you find yourself as amateurs. As Harvard and Yale and Cambridge and Oxford, or whatever you have, the greatest universities in the world, but still you find yourself somewhat amateur coming into the Vajrayana, definitely. And I think even that it's worth discussing this point. Wait and see.
Are there mutual qualities between innocence and cynicism?
Mutual what?
Qualities between innocence and cynicism. Because they're both pertinent qualities within the realm of Tantra. How does one relate the two together?
Well, I think one doesn't try to separate them particularly, but one should look at the whole thing precisely as a total picture, rather than anything else. Once you begin to separate the whole thing, it becomes problematic. That you're trying to put the path into a microscope, and you have problems with that. Friends, maybe we should close our meeting at this point tonight. There's a last thing I would like to mention to you in the form of announcement is this coming Sunday, as I understand, is the Nyingten practice that is happening. And I would like to invite all of you, every one of you, to take part in this, because we begin to feel with the Naropa Institute as such, and learning situations taking place constantly, very powerfully. Maybe a lot of you feel quite good about it, the whole thing, quite possibly, whatever. But at the same time, we have a problem that we don't have enough space. And this space is not particularly, we are talking about, that you don't have your space in your apartment and your classroom is not big enough. We are not talking about those simple space level, but we are talking in terms of psychological space, need to slow down a great deal after the chatterings of intellectual speculations of all kinds of Buddhist studies or scientific studies and body work, all kinds of things that's happening in the Naropa's program is concerned, but still needs for lots of room. And this particular Nyingten would provide for that a group of students who are here are welcomed or invited wholeheartedly And we are going to have an intern practice happening in this very place. And there's a sitting practice, and a walking meditation practice, and a sitting practice, and there's a midday meal, evening meal, and so forth. That it will be absolutely necessary if you are studying seriously in Naropa Institute's program, and particularly if you're thinking wholeheartedly, sharpening your intellect, that more you sharpen your intellect, the more you need the space. And that's the measurements of sanity, that I would feel personal responsibility that when you leave Naropa Institute, I don't want you to see being bunches of nuts who are still cranked up as much as it was before. So this is one of the flavors of Naropa Institute, which provide sitting practice of meditation, which doesn't necessarily mean to say that you have to become a committed Buddhist or whatever, but just to take part in a physical situation, which is absolutely important and necessary, and it will do good for you. And it will be necessary, and a part of our experience and part of our particular lineage that we belonged, we call ourselves the Kagyu tradition of this particular lineage, which is known as the practicing lineage, that we recommend sitting a lot. It doesn't hurt you. In fact, it brings you a great deal. Openness and everything. So it is absolutely necessary and recommended heavily, highly. So please think about that. And it will be necessary if you would like to take something back from taking part in the Naropa Institute and going back to your hometown. It is necessary to have some sitting practice as involved as well at the same time. Then there will be some kind of continuity might happen in your life situation. Thank you very much.
Please don't leave. I have several announcements. Pure Valaya will have a seminar tomorrow from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. And because of the seminar,